The stars were burning. Commander Daniel Hayes stood at the observation window of Orbital Station 7 and watched the distant flashes of light near the outer colonies. Each flash meant another ship dying. Each flash meant more people gone forever. The Empire had come to conquer, and nothing in the galaxy seemed able to stop them. 300 years ago, humanity had joined the Galactic Commonwealth. It was supposed to be a new beginning for the human race. They gave up their weapons and their warships. They dismantled their military bases and their defense systems. The Commonwealth promised peace and protection in return. For 3 centuries, that promise had held true. Humans became traders and artists and diplomats. They spread across 1,000 worlds and built new lives among the stars. They forgot what it meant to fight. Now they were teaching them to remember. Daniel was 62 years old. His hair had gone gray, and his face carried the lines of a man who had seen too much. He had served in the Commonwealth Defense Fleet for 40 years, but the fleet was nothing more than a police force. They chased pirates and settled disputes between trading companies. They had never faced a real war. None of them had. The door behind him opened and Lieutenant walked in. She was young, barely 30, with short brown hair and tired eyes. She carried a tablet in her hands, and Daniel could tell from her expression that the news was bad. "The latest reports from the front," she said. "The Commonwealth fleet engaged near the Helios system. We lost 800 ships. They lost 12. Daniel closed his eyes. 800 ships, thousands of lives, and the just kept coming. "How many vessels do they have now?" he asked. "Our intelligence estimates their main armada at 12,000 warships, plus whatever they are building in the conquered territories." Paused. "At their current rate of advance, they will reach Earth in approximately 6 months. 6 months. Daniel thought about his daughter living on the surface below. He thought about his who had never known anything but peace. He thought about all the humans across the galaxy who believed the Commonwealth would protect them. "The Council is meeting tomorrow," continued. "They are talking about surrender terms. Some of the elder races think that if we submit peacefully, they might spare the core worlds." "They won't," Daniel said flatly. "They don't take prisoners. They don't accept surrender. Every world they have conquered has been stripped of resources and left as a dead rock. Surrender means extinction." Nodded, she knew he was right. Everyone knew, but what choice did they have? The Commonwealth fleet was shattered. Their weapons were inferior. Their ships were slower. Against 12,000 warships they had nothing. Or did they? Daniel turned away from the window. A memory was stirring in his mind. Something his grandfather had told him when he was just a boy. His grandfather had been an engineer in the old Earth Defense Force, back before humanity joined the Commonwealth. He had worked on secret projects that were never meant to be spoken about. On his deathbed, he had whispered something to Daniel that had seemed like the ramblings of a dying man. "There is a ship," the old man had said, "hidden where no one will ever find it. We built it for the day when humanity would need to fight again. Remember this, Daniel. Remember what I am telling you. The Sentinel sleeps beneath Luna, and one day you may need to wake it." Daniel had carried those words for 50 years. He had never spoken of them to anyone. He had almost convinced himself they were nothing but a fantasy. But now, with the coming and humanity facing destruction, he wondered if there was truth in what his grandfather had said. He said slowly, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise me that you will not think I am crazy." She raised an eyebrow. "Sir." "When humanity first made contact with the Commonwealth, we were in the middle of building something, a prototype warship, the most advanced vessel our species had ever designed. It was meant to protect Earth from any threat, no matter how powerful." Daniel paused. "The Commonwealth demanded we stop all military development as a condition of joining. Officially, the project was canceled. Every record was destroyed. Every engineer was sworn to secrecy." Bud asked, "But my grandfather was one of those engineers, and he told me that they never actually destroyed the ship. They hid it. They sealed it away in a place where no Commonwealth inspection team would ever find it." Daniel met her eyes. They buried it inside the moon. Stared at him for a long moment. "Commander, that sounds like a story, a legend, something people tell themselves to feel better." "Maybe it is," Daniel admitted. "But my grandfather was not the kind of man to make things up. He was practical and honest, and he never lied to me about anything in his entire life. He told me about this ship because he believed it was real. He believed that someday humanity might need it." "Even if it exists," said, "it would be 300 years old. The technology would be ancient. How could it possibly stand against warships?" Daniel shook his head. "You don't understand. Our ancestors were different from us. They grew up in a world of constant war. They built weapons not for what they were facing, but for what they might face someday. My grandfather said the Sentinel was designed to fight enemies that humanity had not even met yet. It was built to be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." Was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that Daniel had been asking himself. "How do we find it?" "My grandfather gave me coordinates before he died, a location deep beneath the lunar surface. I have never checked them. I have never told anyone about them, but I have carried them with me for 50 years just in case." Daniel pulled out a small piece of paper from his pocket. The numbers written on it were faded with age. "If there is even a small chance that this ship exists, we have to try. We have nothing else left." Looked at the paper, then looked at Daniel. She should have thought he was insane. She should have dismissed everything he said as desperate fantasy. But something in his eyes told her that he believed every word. And with the coming to burn their world, what did they have to lose? "What do you need?" she asked. "A small team. People I can trust. An engineer, a pilot, and someone who knows weapons. We need to get to the moon without anyone asking questions. If the Commonwealth finds out what we are doing, they will stop us. They have always been afraid of what humanity might become if we remembered how to fight." Nodded slowly. "I know some people, good people who are tired of waiting to die. When do we leave?" Daniel looked out the window one more time. The flashes of light were getting closer. Time was running out. "Tonight," he said. "We leave tonight." Shuttle descended through the darkness toward the lunar surface. Daniel sat in the back with his small team, watching the gray landscape grow larger through the viewport. None of them spoke. They were all thinking about what they might find below. Had brought 3 people, just as Daniel had asked. Chief Engineer Cooper was a heavy-set man in his 40s with thick arms and a permanent frown. He had spent 20 years keeping old Commonwealth ships running on spare parts and determination. If anyone could understand ancient human technology, it was him. Next to sat Aaron Drake, a weapons specialist who had been discharged from the defense fleet for asking too many questions about why their ships carried such weak armaments. He was tall and thin, with cold blue eyes that never seemed to blink. He had jumped at the chance to come on this mission. The pilot was a woman named. She was small and quiet with steady hands and the reputation of being the best shuttle pilot in the Earth sector. She had lost her brother when they destroyed the colony on New Haven. She did not talk about it, but everyone knew she was looking for a way to fight back. The shuttle touched down near a crater that had no name on any official map. Daniel checked his coordinates one more time, then led the team out onto the surface. Their suits protected them from the vacuum, but nothing could protect them from the cold loneliness of the lunar wastes. This place had been abandoned for centuries. No one had walked here since before any of them were born. "The entrance should be nearby," Daniel said through the communicator. "My grandfather described it as a natural cave formation that was expanded and reinforced. Look for anything that does not match the surrounding rock." They spread out and searched. The gravity was low and they bounced across the surface in long, slow steps. For nearly an hour they found nothing but dust and stone, then called out, "Over here, there is something strange about this rock formation." They gathered around her. She was standing next to what looked like a solid wall of gray stone, but when scanned it with his equipment, he let out a surprised sound. This is not natural. There is metal underneath. Someone built this to look like rock. Daniel stepped forward and placed his hand on the surface. He felt a slight vibration, so faint that he almost missed it. Something beneath the stone was still running after 300 years. "How do we get in?" asked. Was already working. He found a small panel hidden beneath a layer of dust and connected his tools to it. The technology was old, but the principles were the same. After a few minutes of work, a section of the rock wall slid aside, revealing a dark tunnel leading down into the moon. They entered one by one. The tunnel was wide enough for them to walk side by side, and the walls were made of smooth metal that had not rusted or decayed. Emergency lights flickered to life as they passed, responding to their presence after centuries of darkness. "The power is still on," said with wonder in his voice. "Someone built an automated system that has been maintaining this place the whole time." They walked for what felt like hours. The tunnel went deeper and deeper, twisting and turning in ways that would confuse anyone trying to map it. There were false passages and dead ends and heavy doors that required Daniel to enter codes his grandfather had made him memorize. The old engineers had not wanted this place to be found. Finally, they reached a massive circular door. It was 20 meters tall and covered in warnings written in Old Earth languages. Daniel read the words slowly. "Authorized personnel only, Sentinel Project, property of Earth Defense Force." He looked at the others. "This is it." Connected to the door controls and began working. The system was more complex than anything they had encountered so far. It had been designed to keep out even the most determined intruder. "I need time," said. "This is not going to be easy." Daniel nodded. "Take whatever time you need. We are not leaving without what is behind that door." It took 4 hours to crack the system. When the door finally opened, it did so with a deep rumble that they felt through the floor of the tunnel. Ancient air rushed past them, cold and stale and somehow electric with possibilities. They stepped through the door and stopped. The cavern was enormous. It stretched nearly 2 kilometers in every direction, carved out of the lunar rock by machines that must have worked for years. Support structures lined the walls, holding equipment and supplies that had been sealed away for 3 centuries. And in the center of it all, floating in a massive docking cradle, was the ship. Daniel had seen many ships in his life, Commonwealth cruisers and destroyers and ancient vessels in museums, but he had never seen anything like this. The Sentinel was a wedge of dark metal, angular and brutal in its design. It looked like a weapon given form. Every line of its hull spoke of violence and power. Where Commonwealth ships were elegant and curved, this vessel was sharp and deadly. It was not beautiful, it was terrifying. "Mother of Mercy," Aaron whispered, "what did our ancestors build?" The ship was covered in weapon systems that easy classification. There were long rails running along the hull that identified as magnetic accelerators. There were arrays of dishes and projectors that might have been energy weapons. There were tubes and launchers for missiles or torpedoes. And there were other things, stranger things, that none of them could identify. Along the hull, faded letters spelled out a name: USS Sentinel. "The Sentinel-class deep space combat vessel," Daniel said softly. "My grandfather talked about it like it was a living thing. He said they built it to kill anything that threatened Earth, anything at all." Was already moving toward a terminal near the dock. She wiped away 3 centuries of dust and found that the screen still worked. Her fingers moved across the controls, and data began to flow. "The systems are still active," she reported. "There is some kind of automated maintenance cycle that has been keeping everything running. The reactors are in standby mode. The weapons are stored but intact. The navigation systems are waiting for coordinates." She looked up at Daniel with something like hope in her eyes. "Commander, this ship can still fly." Was staring at the Sentinel with the expression of a man who had just found something he never believed could exist. "The technology in this thing is incredible. It is old, yes, but it is not primitive. Our ancestors built systems that the Commonwealth still does not have. They were afraid of us. That is why they made humanity disarm. They were afraid of what we could do. Daniel walked toward the ship. Up close, it was even more impressive. The hull was made of some kind of alloy he did not recognize. It seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He placed his hand on the metal and felt that same faint vibration he had felt at the entrance. The ship was sleeping, but it was alive. "Can we fly it with just 5 people?" asked. Was already heading toward the boarding ramp. The design specifications say it was meant for a crew of 800, but most of those would have been for damage control and manual operations. If the automation is still working, we might be able to manage with a skeleton crew. "How long until we can launch?" Daniel asked. Paused at the ramp and looked back. "Give me 3 days, I will figure it out." Daniel shook his head. "You have 2 days. The advance fleet will reach the solar system by then. If we are not ready, there will be nothing left to save." Nodded grimly and disappeared into the ship. The others followed, one by one. Daniel was the last to board. He stood at the ramp for a moment, looking up at the vessel that his grandfather had helped build. 300 years this ship had waited in the darkness. 300 years it had slept while humanity forgot how to fight. Now it was time to wake up. The sentinel woke slowly, like a beast stirring from a long hibernation. Deep inside the ship, reactors that had been cold for 3 centuries began to heat up. Power flowed through circuits that had waited patiently in the darkness. Lights flickered on in corridors that had not seen movement since before anyone alive was born. The ship had been sleeping, but it had never forgotten its purpose. Worked without rest for 2 days straight. He crawled through maintenance tunnels and climbed into machinery spaces and connected his tools to systems he did not fully understand. The technology was old, but it was not primitive. In some ways, it was more advanced than anything the Commonwealth had ever produced. The engineers who built this ship had been preparing for a war that they believed would determine the survival of the human race. They had not held anything back. On the bridge, Daniel studied the command systems at his side. The layout was different from modern ships, but the basic principles were the same. A captain's chair sat in the center, surrounded by stations for navigation, weapons, communications, and engineering. At the front of the bridge was dark, but when activated they saw the interior of the lunar cavern in perfect clarity. "The imaging systems are still working," said from the pilot's station. "The ship is using some kind of sensor array I have never seen before. It can detect objects at ranges that should be impossible." Aaron was at the weapons station, scrolling through lists of armaments with growing disbelief. "Commander, I need you to see this." Daniel walked over and looked at the screen. What he saw made him understand why the Commonwealth had been so afraid of humanity. "Rail accelerators," Aaron read aloud. "They fire solid projectiles at 12% of light speed. No shield technology in the galaxy can stop a kinetic impact at that velocity." He scrolled down. "Directed energy arrays. These generate beams powerful enough to cut through a battleship's armor in seconds." He scrolled again. "Missile bays carrying 400 nuclear warheads, each one 100 times more powerful than anything the Commonwealth allows." He scrolled one more time and stopped. "And this, something called a gravitational lance." "What does it do?" asked. Aaron shook his head slowly. "According to these specifications, it creates artificial singularities, microscopic black holes that exist for a fraction of a second before collapsing. It fires them at faster-than-light speeds." He looked up at Daniel. "This weapon can delete ships from existence. There would be nothing left. No debris, no bodies, nothing." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. His ancestors had built this ship to fight enemies they could not even imagine. They had created weapons that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than rules. No wonder the Commonwealth had demanded humanity disarm. This single vessel could threaten entire fleets. "Our ancestors were not peaceful people," Daniel said quietly. "They grew up in a world of constant conflict. They fought wars over land and resources and ideas. When they looked at the galaxy, they saw potential enemies everywhere. So they built a ship that could fight all of them at once. His voice came through the communication system. Bridge, this is engineering. The reactors are online and running at full capacity. All primary systems are operational. I have bypassed the crew requirement protocols. The automation can handle most functions with minimal supervision. What about propulsion? Daniel asked. Ready when you are, Commander. This ship is faster than anything I have ever seen. It uses some kind of field manipulation drive that I do not fully understand, but it works. I tested it at low power. There was a pause. I think we are ready to fly. Daniel sat down in the command chair. The seat adjusted to his body automatically, and displays around him lit up with information. For a moment, he felt like the ship was reading him, learning who he was and what he needed. The feeling passed, but a strange connection remained. Open the launch doors, he ordered. Somewhere above them, ancient machinery began to move. The roof of the cavern split apart, revealing a tunnel that led up through the lunar rock to the surface. Dust and debris fell away as seals that had held for 3 centuries finally broke. Grip the flight controls. Her hands were steady. Ready for launch on your command, sir. Daniel took a deep breath. In a few moments, they would announce their presence to the galaxy. Every sensor in the solar system would detect them. The Commonwealth would demand answers. They would send ships to investigate. There would be no going back. Launch, he said. The Sentinel rose from its cradle with a grace that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. It climbed through the tunnel, its hull scraping against stone in places that had shifted over the centuries. Then it burst out onto the lunar surface, and for the first time in 300 years, the ship saw the stars. Push the engines to full power. The Sentinel accelerated away from the moon, leaving a trail of blue fire in its wake. On sensors across the solar system, alarms began to sound. No one had ever seen a ship like this. No one knew where it had come from. No one could identify the strange readings it was giving off. Monitored the communications. We are being hailed by Orbital Station 7. They want to know who we are and what ship we are flying. Tell them nothing, Daniel said. Not yet. Moments later, another signal came in. This one was not from any human station. Commander said, her voice tight with tension, I am picking up transmissions. Their advance fleet has entered the solar system. 47 vessels, including 3 planetary siege cruisers. They are heading directly for Earth. Daniel had expected this. The sent advance fleets to test defenses before the main Armada arrived. 47 ships was a small force by their standards, but it was more than enough to destroy anything the Commonwealth had left in the system. Time until they reach Earth, he asked. 6 hours at their current speed. Daniel nodded, set an intercept course. We will meet them halfway. Looked back at him. Sir, those are 47 warships. We are 1 vessel with a crew of 5. I am aware of the numbers, Lieutenant. Daniel activated the ship-wide communication. All hands, this is the commander. We are about to engage the enemy. I know the odds seem impossible, but our ancestors built this ship for exactly this moment. They believed in humanity. They believed we could face any threat and survive. It is time to prove them right. He closed the channel and looked at his small crew. In engineering, at the helm, Aaron at weapons, on communications. 5 people against an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. It should have been hopeless. It should have been suicide. But something in Daniel's heart told him otherwise. The Sentinel was alive around him, its systems humming with barely contained power. The ship had been waiting for this, waiting to show the galaxy what humanity could do when they stopped being peaceful. Take us in, Daniel ordered. The Sentinel changed course and accelerated toward the enemy. On the flagship, Admiral received reports of an unknown vessel approaching his fleet. He studied the sensor readings with contempt. One ship, emerging from the primitive human. It was hardly worth his attention. He ordered a destroyer squadron to eliminate it. That was the last mistake he would ever make. The 5 destroyers moved in standard attack formation. They were sleek vessels, each one 3 times the size of the Sentinel, crewed by warriors who had conquered 100 worlds. Their commanders saw the lone human ship on their sensors and felt nothing but contempt. This would be easy. This would take moments. Then they would continue to Earth and begin the burning. On the Sentinel, Daniel watched them approach. The tactical display showed the enemy ships as red markers, growing closer with each passing second. He could see their weapons charging, their shields activating, their crews preparing to fire. They had no idea what was coming. "Range in 30 seconds, reported. Her voice was calm, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. "Aaron," Daniel said, "weapon status." "All systems online and ready, Commander." Aaron's fingers moved across his console with the precision of a man who had waited his entire life for this moment. "Rail accelerators are loaded. Energy arrays are charged. Point defense is on automatic. Just give the word." Daniel leaned forward in his chair. "Fire when ready." The Sentinel's rail accelerators spoke first. They made no sound in the vacuum of space, but inside the ship, Daniel felt a deep vibration as electromagnetic rails hurled tungsten projectiles at impossible speeds. The rounds crossed the distance between the ships in less than a heartbeat. The lead destroyer's shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. Commonwealth technology focused on lasers and plasma bolts, attacks that could be dispersed and absorbed. But nothing in the galaxy was designed to stop a solid piece of metal traveling at 12% of light speed. The projectiles punched through the shields like they were not even there. They tore through the armored hull without slowing down. They exited the other side of the ship in a spray of fire and debris. The destroyer did not explode. It simply ceased to exist as a functioning vessel. One moment it was a warship crewed by 300 warriors. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of broken metal, drifting silently through the void. The other 4 destroyers had no time to react. Aaron triggered the directed energy arrays, and beams of focused radiation cut through space like blades of pure light. The beams struck the second destroyer and sliced it in half. The 2 pieces spun away from each other, trailing fire and bodies. The third destroyer tried to turn, tried to flee, but the beams followed it. They carved through its engine section, and the vessel went dark. The 4th and 5th destroyers fired their weapons in desperate response, but the Sentinel was already moving through the ship into evasive maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its mass. The enemy fire passed harmlessly through empty space. Aaron fired again. The 4th destroyer vanished in a flash of light as its reactor core was punctured. The 5th managed to transmit a single distress call before a rail accelerator round converted its bridge into vapor. The entire engagement had lasted 11 seconds. On the command ship, Admiral stared at his tactical display in stunned silence. 5 destroyers, 300 warriors in each, gone in the time it took to draw a single breath. The unknown human vessel was still there, undamaged, continuing toward his fleet as if nothing had happened. For the first time in his long career, felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. "All ships," he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "concentrate fire on that vessel, destroy it immediately, maximum firepower, now." 42 warships turned their weapons toward the Sentinel. They were carriers and cruisers and battleships, the pride of the Imperial Navy. Their weapons arrays lit up with accumulated power. Thousands of energy bolts and missiles filled the void, creating a wall of destruction that nothing could possibly survive. The Sentinel flew straight into it. His hands moved across the controls with inhuman precision. The ship danced through the barrage, rolling and spinning and changing direction with a speed that physics. Point defense systems tracked incoming missiles and destroyed them before they could get close. The energy bolts that did strike the hull splashed harmlessly against armor that absorbed the impacts without marking. His voice came from engineering, filled with wonder. The hull is not taking damage. The energy is being distributed across the entire surface. I have never seen material like this. What did they make this ship out of? Daniel did not answer. He was watching Aaron work the weapons console, firing again and again with mechanical efficiency. Each shot from the rail accelerators found its target. Each beam from the energy arrays cut through enemy vessels like a knife through paper. They were not fighting a battle. They were being slaughtered. A carrier tried to launch its attack craft. Aaron destroyed the launch bay before a single fighter could emerge, then put a rail accelerator round through the carrier's reactor. The explosion consumed 3 smaller vessels that had been flying too close. A battleship charged the Sentinel head-on, pouring fire from every weapon it had, waited until the last possible moment, then pulled the ship up and over the battleship's hull. As they passed, Aaron fired the ventral energy arrays straight down into the enemy vessel. The beams cut through the battleship from top to bottom, splitting it into burning fragments. The battle raged for 43 minutes. They tried everything. They tried to surround the Sentinel. They tried to coordinate their fire. They tried to ram. Nothing worked. The human ship moved through their formation like a ghost, appearing where they did not expect, striking before they could react, vanishing before they could respond. One by one, the vessels fell. Destroyers and frigates and cruisers and carriers. Ships that had conquered worlds were reduced to drifting wreckage. Crews that had never known defeat died in the cold darkness between stars. The pride of the Imperial Navy became a field of debris. Admiral Orr watched his fleet die around him. He had commanded 1,000 battles. He had never lost. Now he stood on his burning bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his crew, and watched the unknown human ship approach for the final kill. "What are you?" he whispered. The Sentinel did not answer. Its weapons fired one last time, and the command ship came apart in a silent explosion of fire and metal. Then there was silence. The battle was over. 47 warships had been reduced to nothing. The Sentinel floated alone among the debris, its hull marked by scorched burns but otherwise undamaged. On the bridge, Daniel's crew sat in stunned silence. They had just done the impossible. 5 people in an ancient ship had destroyed an entire fleet. "Damage report," Daniel said quietly. His voice came through after a moment. "Minor hull scoring, some systems running hot, ammunition expenditure at 12%. A pause. "Commander, we barely took a scratch." Was staring at her console. No distress calls from the enemy, no survivors detected. She looked up at Daniel. "We killed them all." Daniel nodded slowly. He felt no joy in what they had done. They had been living beings with families and hopes and fears, but they had come to destroy his home. They had come to murder his people, and they would have done it without mercy if the Sentinel had not been there. "That was just the advance fleet," he said. "The main Armada is still coming, 12,000 ships. We need to be ready." Turned in her seat. "Sir, we just destroyed 47 warships, but 12,000 is a different matter entirely. Even with this ship, those odds are insurmountable." Daniel looked at the debris field surrounding them. The remains of an entire fleet, destroyed by one vessel. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe our ancestors knew exactly what they were building. Maybe they designed this ship to do the impossible." He stood up from his chair. "Set course for Earth. We need to resupply and prepare. They will not wait long before sending everything they have." The Sentinel turned away from the battlefield and accelerated toward home. Behind it, the wreckage of the advance fleet drifted silently through space, a warning to anyone who thought humanity had forgotten how to fight.